Welcome back. The show is called Brand Equity and I'm Sonali Krishna. Now, from being the youngest managing director of a UK media company, Steve King is now one of the most experienced global network leaders. In 2000, Zennith became part of the Publicis group and Steve King was part of the management team that oversaw the successful merger with the Publicis-owned Optimedia network. In 2004, he went on to becoming the CEO of ZenithOptimedia Worldwide. He is also credited with being one of the key architects of Vivaki within the Publicis group, which is really a dynamic and unique operation housing key media and digital assets of the network. I caught up with Steve during his visit to India to get a sense of what he has in mind for the Indian market and, of course, how the media dynamics are changing globally. Thank you so much for joining us, Steve. Truly a pleasure to have you on the show.
Nice to be here.
What brings you to India?
Doing a review of how business is going for the year to date. We're also looking at meeting some potential acquisitions, which is interesting for us.
When you say acquisitions, which space are you looking at?
We're looking at a number of acquisitions. We're quite well along the road of a number of them, but I certainly think the acquisitions we'll make will be predominantly, but not exclusively, in the digital space. You
began 2012 with a new positioning called Live ROI. If you can explain what your positioning really means and how is it different from any other agency?
You know, when we came together as Zennith and Optimedia at the time of the acquisition of Publicis, I became the global CEO and we brought together our management teams and actually born out of Asia, we decided to position ourselves as the ROI agency. Now, I'm sure every agency delivers ROI, return on investment, you know, but for us, you know, the key thing is that we wanted to have a really clear positioning which would help develop our systems and our tools and the type of people that we employed. We're obviously, as you say, 8 years further on, and ROI is a more relevant metric now for most of CMOs. We wanted to stick to this ROI positioning. We think it's the most relevant, credible positioning for any of amongst our competitive set, but we wanted to give it an additional relevancy, hence this factor we've now, the way that we go to market is through this live ROI, and this really reflects the way that consumers can receive messages and the way that we can react to those is much more instantaneous.
So tell me, does your remuneration model then change a bit? Because, you know, let's assume that you have promised certain amount of delivery and you fall short. Does that mean that, you know, the client will actually pay on the efficacy of your, you know, your whole program?
Yeah, I think what we've seen is that, you know, we've moved from a remuneration system which was entirely based on commission, and increasingly, even when we were just, you know, had ROI, increasingly we seek to sort of have payment by results.
Right.
And as I say, that's customized for each individual client, but the more that we can link our performance to their results and the outcome of the investments we make, the better it is for both sides. And as long as you can agree on that, I think it becomes much deeper business relationship. You know, we used to have a relationship with clients where, frankly, we were just an executional partner. We would just buy time and space and then report back on syndicated data. If I look at virtually every client around the world, it's a much deeper relationship as clients look to for greater navigational clarity on how they're actually going to go to market, how they're going to make those investments.
If you look at faster growing markets and developed markets, and given the fact that, you know, the advanced markets are going through a depression which is much more severe than a slowdown that we're witnessing. What are client conversations like? How different is it in the West as compared to the East?
I think all of our clients are asking the same thing. You know, where's the growth going to come from? And it's the same for our business and the same for the clients. You know, we're looking at where we can get the greatest growth, and that very much mirrors what our clients are seeing. So clients are obviously looking to new forms of media contact. You know, particularly those which are going to give them more definitive return on investment, and obviously digital is a prime area that we're looking into. They're also looking to move monies from the lower growth markets, and in some cases the markets were actually in decline, and moving much more quickly into the faster growing markets in order they can capitalize on that potential growth. And we're seeing that happen much more quickly geographically now. You know, where it used to be much more of a slow macro trend in terms of intra-company, intra-market investments, we're now seeing clients move monies between brands and between categories almost on a month-to-month, quarterly-quarter basis.
What's your view on, you know, the whole General Motors Facebook controversy? You know, when they decided to withdraw their spends from Facebook, a lot of other clients seem to voice the fact that they don't know what the conversion really is like, and if you know there's any actual impact that's happening via Facebook onto sales, you know, and there are some brands who say that no, it's actually rubbing off on their brand, but there's nothing tangible about it. You know, as an agency that follows a live ROI, you know, concept, what's your view?
I would agree that likes and fans are a rather blunt metric for how the consumers are responding. I do agree with that, but you know, if you talk to most advertisers, they say, look, you know, we've investing for 40, 50 years, billions and billions of dollars in television or radio or newspapers, and generally those investments are made and measured on syndicated data based on a very, very small sample. So it's not as though you could say, okay, well, you know, this metric that we use generally in Facebook is suddenly sort of, you know, of no value.
Sure.
When the metric that the currency that everybody uses, I would say, you know, for magazines or newspapers, every day, say television, you know, is equally, it's not a census, it's a very, very small sample, and we all know how people are watching television, for example, and I would suggest that, you know, actually the research methodology we've got for looking at social is actually comparable, if not far ahead of what we actually use for investing much more money in some of the more traditional media.
Fair enough. All the very best, and lovely to have you on the show.
Thank you very much.